All right, so get this. We're doing a deep dive into Entropia Universe with a real cash economy.
Yeah, that in-game currency, PED, it's directly tied to US dollars.
That's wild. So every click you make, every creature you hunt, there are real-world consequences.
Exactly. So in this deep dive, we're going to try to help you make some, smart choices.
Avoid those costly mistakes.
Exactly. We'll unpack these sources, figure out how to maximize your enjoyment.
And hopefully your PED too, right?
Exactly.
Okay, so we're dealing with real money here. One wrong move, and bam!
That's right.
You're out a significant chunk of change. I'm seeing a lot of talk about mentoring in these sources. Is that really that important?
It's absolutely crucial, especially for a beginner.
Okay.
Think about it this way. You wouldn't jump into a Formula One race without some training.
Right.
So this is kind of similar. You need a mentor to show you the ropes and prevent you from, well...
crashing and burning.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It could save you a ton of time, money, and frustration.
Makes sense. So finding a good mentor is priority number one. What should I be looking for?
Someone who's knowledgeable and experienced, of course.
Okay.
But also someone who's patient, willing to answer your questions.
Right.
It also helps if they're online when you are.
Okay.
So you can get that real-time guidance.
Gotcha. So let's say I've found my Entropia Yoda. What are some of the first things I should be focusing on as a newbie?
Well, getting a handle on the basics.
Sure.
Inventory management controls that sort of thing. But one thing that really jumps out from these guides is customizing your keyboard map.
The keyboard map?
Yeah.
Why is that so important?
Well, imagine you're in a firefight. Things are getting intense.
Yeah.
And you need to heal quickly.
Yeah.
You don't want to be like, where's that healing tool?
Right.
Fumbling through menus. That could cost you dearly.
Literally.
Literally, yeah.
Okay.
So having quick access to key items, weapons, healing tools, even mining equipment
Oh, yeah.
could be a real lifesaver.
Or at least a PED saver.
Exactly.
Right, time is money, especially when we're talking about Entropia Universe. Speaking of money, everyone wants to know how to make those sweet, sweet PEDs. But I get the feeling it's not as easy as it sounds.
No, you're not going to get rich overnight in Entropia Universe.
Okay.
One of the key things, though, that kind of jumps out from these sources is the importance of what they call eco, short for economy.
Eco, okay.
Yeah,
So every action you take has an economic impact.
absolutely. From the creatures you hunt to the materials you mine.
So it's not just about clicking and collecting, it's about thinking like an entrepreneur.
Precisely. You need to be constantly evaluating your options, weighing the potential profits against the costs.
Making strategic decisions, all right.
Strategic decisions that will maximize your long-term gains, exactly.
Yeah.
And keep in mind, there's a kind of a natural decay factor in Entropia Universe.
The decay, what do you mean by that?
So basically, everything in the game, your weapons, your tools, the resources, they all lose value over time. It's kind of like a built-in house edge,
Yeah.
constantly chipping away at the value of your items. So on average, you can expect like a 5 to 10% loss in TT value.
Okay.
That's the base price you can sell an item for at the trade terminal.
Oh, all right. So that's definitely something to keep in mind. So we've got eco, we've got decay, factor that into every decision. But how do we actually start making PEDs? I mean, there are so many options: hunting, mining, crafting. Where do we even begin?
Well, let's start with hunting. It's one of the most popular ways to make PED.
Especially for beginners.
Especially for beginners, yeah. But even with hunting, it's not as simple as just, blasting everything that moves. The guides you've got really emphasize the importance of efficiency.
Okay.
And that comes down to understanding this really crucial concept. It's called damage per peck, or DPP.
DPP. Okay.
Yeah.
So what is that?
Essentially, it's how much damage you inflict for every peck you spend on ammo.
Gotcha.
So you want to maximize that ratio.
Okay.
So for example, let's say you're tempted to use that shiny new weapon you just bought, but your skill level isn't quite there yet. You might actually be better off sticking with a basic weapon. Maybe something like this specific weapon name if you're hunting those common creatures, like the common creature.
Okay.
You'll get a higher DPP and save some PED.
So it's not about having the biggest gun, it's about using the right tool for the job.
Exactly. And there are other factors to consider too, like the creature's loot value, how long it takes to kill it. You need to weigh all those variables to find the most profitable strategy.
Right, so a lot more strategy to hunting than I initially realized. What about mining? Is that another viable option for beginners?
Absolutely. Mining can be a really solid way to earn some PED. especially if you're patient and willing to learn the ropes.
Okay.
It all starts with understanding the tools of the trade, the finder and probes.
Okay, so how do those work?
So the finder is what you use to locate mineral deposits, kind of like a metal detector. And the probes are what you use to actually extract the resources, kind of the virtual shovel.
So it's like treasure hunting. Instead of digging for gold, we're digging for valuable mineral.
That's a great way to put it. And just like with hunting, there's a whole element of strategy involved. One key factor is depth.
Depth. Okay, why is that important?
Well, the deeper you go, the more valuable the resources tend to be.
Okay.
But reaching those depths, it requires using enhancers, and those add to your costs. So it's a constant balancing act, you know?
Yeah, so it's a risk-reward calculation.
Exactly. You could hit the jackpot mining deep, but you could also end up losing PED if you're not careful.
Right, so it's not just about digging deep, it's about digging smart.
Precisely. And you also need to factor in market fluctuations. The price of those mined resources, it can go up, it can go down. You need to know when to mine, when to sell.
To maximize your profit, right?
Exactly. And that brings us to another important aspect of Entropia Universe, the auction house, or AH.
Okay, I've heard a lot about the auction house, but I'm still a bit fuzzy on how it works.
Think of it like a giant online marketplace where players can buy and sell just about anything. Raw materials, crafted items, even virtual land.
Oh, wow. So it's like eBay for Entropia Universe.
That's a great analogy. And just like with any marketplace, the key is to understand supply and demand. If there's a lot of a particular item on the market, the price will be lower. If it's scarce, the price will be higher.
Makes sense. So if I want to sell something on the auction house, how do I know how much to charge?
That's where MU comes in. That stands for markup.
Okay.
It's basically the difference between the TT value of an item and the price you're selling it for on the AH.
So the higher the MU, the more profit I can make.
Exactly. But you also need to consider sales volume. An item with a high MU might not sell if there's no demand for it. It's all about finding that sweet spot.
Gotcha. Okay, so we've covered hunting, mining, and the auction house. What about crafting? Is that something a beginner should even consider?
Crafting can be very lucrative,
Okay.
but it can also be quite complex.
Oh,
You need to choose a crafting path wisely, invest in blueprints, materials, develop your skills over time.
so it's more of a long-term investment.
It is, yeah, like building real-world business.
I'm starting to realize that Entropia Universe is not just a game, it's a whole virtual economy.
It is. It really is. And we've only just scratched the surface.
I know, there's still so much more to explore.
We haven't even touched on PvP combat, space exploration, or even that fascinating world of Mind Force.
Whoa, Mind Force. Now you've got my attention. What is Mind Force?
Well, hold on tight, because things are about to get a little mind-bending. Imagine being able to harness the power of your mind to attack enemies, heal yourself,
Yeah.
teleport to different locations, even enhance your physical abilities.
Wow, that sounds incredible.
It is. It really is. But just like everything else in Entropia Universe, it's not something you can just jump into without some preparation. You'll need to invest in a Mind Force implant, acquire Mind Force chips, and really learn how to use these powers effectively.
Okay, I'm definitely going to need to hear more about Mind Force later on, but for now I'm starting to feel a bit overwhelmed with all this information.
Don't worry, it's a lot to take in. The key takeaway for a beginner is focus on the fundamentals.
Okay.
Find a good mentor, understand the ecosystem, and master the basics of your chosen profession. Once you've got those down, then you can start branching out, exploring the more advanced aspects of the game.
All right, so for anyone just starting out in Entropia Universe, what would you say is the most important piece of advice?
Don't be afraid to ask questions. Seek guidance from experienced players. The community is incredibly supportive. You know, there's always someone willing to lend a hand, share their knowledge.
That's reassuring to hear. All right, it looks like we've covered a lot of ground in this first part of our Entropia Universe deep dive.
We have, yeah, just scratched the surface, but hopefully you're starting to see just how deep and complex this universe really is. We've laid the foundation, you know, the real cash economy, mentoring, the strategic thinking needed to succeed. Believe me, there's so much more to come.
I can't wait. Welcome back to our Entropia Universe deep dive. So in part one, we covered, the basics. The real cash economy, mentors, hunting, mining, crafting. Now I'm ready to get into the real strategy.
I like your enthusiasm. That's the kind of mindset that'll take you far in Entropia Universe.
Yeah.
So where do you want to start?
Let's stick with hunting for now.
Yeah.
We talked about DPP, damage per peck, and how it's super important. But how do we actually find those sweet spots where we're maximizing damage and minimizing costs? That
Yeah.
seems like a tricky balance.
You're right, it's all about balance. One of the guides you gave me actually is specifically for new players. It really emphasized, like, don't jump into those high-level weapons too early. You need to max out your current weapon first.
Okay.
Meaning hitting like 10 out of 10 on those hitability and critical hitability stats. Otherwise, you're just wasting ammo in PED.
So even though it can be tempting to go for that like shiny new weapon sometimes, it's better to stick with what you know and make sure you're using it effectively.
Right. It all ties back into that eco concept, remember?
Yeah.
Smart economical choices.
All right, so start small, work my way up, really focus on mastering those basics. Any other hunting tips that stood out to you?
Well, one that might surprise you is one of the experienced hunters actually recommends not healing during a hunt unless it's absolutely necessary.
Wait, what? No healing? That seems kind of risky.
I know, right? Yeah, it's definitely a more advanced strategy. But think about it. Healing tools, they decay with use, just like everything else. So by letting your health regenerate naturally, you're minimizing costs.
So even though it might seem counterintuitive, sometimes taking a few hits can actually be more economical in the long run.
Yeah, you could look at it that way.
But wouldn't that also mean risking more damage? Potentially needing to revive more often?
True, but that's where skill and strategy come in. Ideally, you want to avoid getting hit in the first place. But your sources do mention that taking some damage can actually help you develop your defensive skills.
Interesting. So it's all about finding that balance between risk and reward.
Oh.
Okay, so tools and equipment. Are there any like must-haves for hunters that you noticed?
Several of the guides recommend using eco amps.
Eco amps, okay.
Yeah, they boost your weapon's firepower, but they're relatively cheap to use.
So it's like finding that extra edge, but without breaking the bank.
Exactly.
Are there any specific strategies that come to mind? I imagine hunting can get pretty chaotic, especially when you're dealing with multiple creatures.
Oh yeah, one technique that really stood out was tagging.
Tagging, okay.
Yeah, you use a long-range weapon to tag a specific creature.
Okay.
Helps you separate it from the pack so you can take it down one-on-one without attracting a whole horde. Your personal hunting log actually, there's an entry about a close call you had.
Oh yeah.
Where tagging basically saved you.
Yeah, it was intense.
Yeah, from being totally overwhelmed. So many little tricks to learn.
It's amazing. All right, so what if I want to team up with other players? Is there an advantage to hunting as a group?
Oh, absolutely. Team hunting can be incredibly efficient, especially when you're taking on those tougher creatures. But the guides stress the importance of communication, coordination.
Right, you need to be on the same page.
Yeah, you need a solid plan. Everyone needs to know their role.
Yeah, you don't want everyone running around like chickens with their heads cut off.
Exactly. One tip that stood out was forming a wide circle around the creature you're hunting.
Okay.
That way everyone has a clear shot. Minimizes the risk of friendly fire.
Yeah, friendly fire, not a good thing, especially when real money is involved. Okay, what about the solo hunters out there?
Yeah.
Any tips for those of us who prefer to go it alone? We talked about swunting before.
Yeah.
Which seems like a great way to generate some income, skill up at the same time. Is that something that solo hunters typically do?
Absolutely. And your sources even talk about like certain areas where players gather specifically to sweat those larger creatures together. So it's kind of a community effort, even for those playing solo.
I love that. So even if you're a lone wolf, you can still benefit from the support of the community. What about other solo activities?
Well, one simple but effective strategy that was mentioned a few times is collecting fruit and stones.
Fruit and stone?
Yeah, while you're out exploring, it's low risk, you can earn some extra PED, and it doesn't require any special skills or equipment.
Nice. Little bonus there. Okay, so we've covered a ton of hunting strategies, from choosing the right weapon to mastering those advanced techniques.
Yeah, we have.
I feel like we could spend hours just talking about hunting, but let's move on to mining. What are some of the key things to keep in mind when you're digging for those virtual riches?
Just like with hunting, depth is crucial in mining. The deeper you go, the more valuable the resources tend to be. But remember, reaching those depths requires enhancers, and those can be expensive.
Right, that balance between risk and reward again. It seems like that's a recurring theme in the Entropia universe.
It is, yeah. You're constantly evaluating your options, weighing the potential profits against the costs,
Yeah.
making those strategic decisions, hopefully leading to long-term gains.
So it's not just about digging deep, it's about digging smart. What other factors should miners be aware of?
Well, market fluctuations are key. Just like in the real world, the prices of mined resources, they can go up, they can go down. Knowing when to mine and when to sell can make a huge difference to your profits.
It's like playing the stock market, but with virtual minerals.
Exactly. And just like with stocks, you need to stay informed about those market trends, be ready to adapt your strategy accordingly. Your sources actually include some pretty helpful tips for tracking that market beta, identifying those profitable mining opportunities.
Oh, that's fantastic. Okay, let's talk about selling those hard-earned resources. I know we touched on the auction house earlier, but can we dive a bit deeper into like the different selling options?
Sure. You've got basically three main options: selling to the trade terminal, selling directly to other players, or selling on the auction house.
Okay, so what are the pros and cons of each?
So the trade terminal is the most straightforward. You get a fixed price for your resources,
Okay.
which is typically the lowest of the three options.
Okay.
Quick, it's a convenient, but you are going to sacrifice some potential profit.
So it's like trading in your old car for a guaranteed price, even though you could get more by selling it privately?
Yeah, exactly. Now, selling to other players directly, that could be more profitable, but it also carries some risks, especially if you're dealing with someone you don't know.
Right.
There's always the chance of being scammed, or lowballed.
You got to be careful, so it's important to do your research, be cautious before you just trade with anyone. Okay, what about the auction house then?
The auction house is where you can potentially get the highest prices, but it does require a deeper understanding of the market dynamics.
Okay.
Pricing strategies, auction fees, all of that.
It's like playing a high-stakes game of virtual commerce.
That's a great way to put it.
What are some key things to keep in mind when you're using the auction house?
Well, we already talked about supply and demand, but another important factor is MU, that markup, remember? The difference between the TT value of an item and the price you're selling it for.
Right, yeah. So the higher the MU, the more profit I can make. But you also mentioned sales volume, right?
Yeah, exactly. You could list an item with a sky-high MU, but if nobody's buying, you're not making any profit. It's all about finding that sweet spot.
Okay, so there is a real art to pricing your items on the auction house. Any other tips for maximizing those profits?
Pay attention to the auction fees.
Okay.
Those can eat into your profits if you're not careful.
Yeah.
Some of your sources recommend setting a minimum bid, that covers those fees.
Okay.
So that guarantees you a profit, even if the bidding doesn't go as high as you hoped.
That's a really smart strategy. It seems like every aspect of Entropia Universe requires careful planning, strategic thinking.
It does, yeah.
Whether you're hunting, mining, or crafting, it's all about understanding that ecosystem, analyzing those market trends.
Making informed decisions.
Okay, all right, let's move on to crafting then. This profession seems a bit more complex than the others. What are some of the key things a beginner crafter should focus on?
Just like with any business, the first step is choosing your niche. What kind of items do you want to craft? Weapons, armor, tools, consumables. You need to research the market, identify items that are in demand, and really focus on developing your skills in that area.
Okay, so don't just jump into crafting random things. Have a plan, choose a specialization, then what?
Then you need to acquire blueprints.
Blueprints, okay.
Yeah, think of them as the recipes for the items you want to create. You can find blueprints from loot drops, missions, even the auction house.
It's like collecting rare cookbooks, but for virtual cuisine.
Exactly.
I like it. Once I have the blueprint, though, what do I actually need to craft those items?
Materials, of course. Just like a real-world chef needs ingredients, you'll need to gather the raw materials,
So is it back to mining then?
Mining is one source, but you can also get materials through hunting, missions, even trading with other players.
Okay, so we've got the blueprints, we've got the materials. What's the final step in the crafting process?
You'll need a construction machine.
Construction machine.
Yeah, essentially it's like a virtual workshop where you combine those blueprints and materials to create the final product.
So it's like having a high-tech 3D printer.
Yeah.
That can create anything from swords to spaceships.
That's a great analogy. But just like with any sophisticated piece of equipment, there's a learning curve involved. It takes practice and skill to become a master crafter.
This is all starting to make sense. Entropia Universe, it's a world where every action has consequences, where success really hinges on careful planning, informed decision-making. It's not just a game, it's a virtual microcosm of like a real-world economy.
It is, yeah. And that's what makes it so compelling. You're constantly engaged, constantly learning, constantly adapting to this ever-changing world.
This has been incredibly insightful. We've covered so much ground already on hunting, mining, crafting. I feel like I'm starting to grasp that strategic depth of these professions. But there's one more topic I'm dying to explore, and that's mind force. I'm ready to delve into that mental side of Entropia Universe.
Okay, so we dove deep into the ecosystem. We talked about mastering the art of hunting and mining and crafting. But now I'm really excited to unlock the secrets of Mindforce. Let's dive into the mental side of Entropia Universe.
It's fascinating. It really struck me how much your sources emphasize the community and social elements of Entropia.
Right.
It's clearly more than just like a solitary grind for PED.
It's like all those sources are saying, yeah, you can play solo, but the real experience comes from connecting with other players.
Exactly, like the mentoring system. It's not just a veteran player giving you tips. It's about building a real connection that can help you navigate this whole crazy world.
I saw that. Several of them talked about how their mentors became like close friends, even business partners. Yeah. It's like finding your tribe, your Entropia family.
Exactly. What about those larger groups, though, the societies? What kind of role do they play?
Societies are huge in Entropia. They're like guilds or clans in other games. It gives players a structure, a way to team up, pool resources, achieve goals together.
So it's like a built-in support network.
Exactly.
What kind of things do they do together?
Oh, everything. Hunting expeditions, land grabs, crafting operations. Some even have their own events and competitions.
Wow. So it's like a whole virtual society within a virtual society.
It really is, and it makes those social interactions even more impactful when you consider the real cash element. The stakes are higher when you know your decisions could have real-world financial consequences.
Right. It's not just bragging rights or virtual points on the line. It's real money. That's going to create some interesting dynamics within the community.
For sure. One of your sources, that trader's log, really highlights that. Imagine buying low on one planet and selling high on another, constantly analyzing the market, figuring out the logistics of interplanetary trade.
It sounds almost like running a business in the real world with all the risks and rewards.
Exactly, that entrepreneurial spirit. That's what drives so much of the social interaction in Entropia. Players bartering, trading, forming partnerships, even competing with each other in this virtual marketplace.
And let's not forget about those legendary stories of players striking it rich. I saw one forum post, someone found a super rare item that sold for thousands of dollars.
It's those stories that make Entropia so captivating. That dream of turning your in-game efforts into real-world profit.
But of course, there's always the risk of losing big, too. It's a high-stakes game. Not everyone comes out on top.
True. That real cash element can be pretty unforgiving. But even those stories of loss become valuable lessons. Players share their experiences, the good and that bad. They help each other avoid making those same mistakes.
So it's a constant cycle of risk, reward, and knowledge sharing that fuels the community.
Exactly. It's a constantly evolving ecosystem. Players adapting to the market, learning from each other's experiences, really pushing the boundaries of what's possible in this world.
Okay, let's bring it back to Mindforce, though. How does this whole mental power system fit into the social and economic landscape of Entropia?
Mindforce is a great example of how even the most individualistic aspects of the game are tied to those social and economic factors. Remember, you need a Mindforce implant to use those abilities. And those implants, along with the Mindforce chips, they're all created and traded within the player-driven economy.
So even if you're a solo Mindforce user, you're still reliant on the community.
Yeah.
What about the actual use of Mindforce? Is that mostly a solo thing, or are there team-based applications?
Well, some abilities are definitely geared towards solo play, like teleportation or healing yourself. But there's some powerful team-based applications too. Some societies have dedicated Mindforce specialists. They play a crucial role in large-scale hunts or those big PvP battles.
It's incredible how interconnected everything is in Entropia. The economy, the community, the different professions, even Mindforce. It's all part of what makes the game so unique.
Exactly, and that's one of the big takeaways from this whole deep dive. Entropia Universe is not just a game, it's a living, breathing virtual society.
So for someone starting out in this massive world, what's the most important thing to keep in mind?
Embrace that social aspect. Don't just treat it as a solo grind. Reach out to other players, find mentors, join a society, participate in the community. That's where you'll really find the richness of the Entropia Universe experience.
I am so glad we did this deep dive. I'm honestly blown away by how much we've learned about Entropia Universe. From the basics of PED and mentoring, to the strategic intricacies of all these professions, even the mind-bending world of Mindforce, it's been a wild ride.
It has been a pleasure exploring this with you. Hopefully this deep dive has given you the knowledge and the inspiration to go out there and start your own Entropia adventure.
To all you listeners out there, get ready to dive into a world unlike any other. Explore the diverse landscapes, master the intricate systems, connect with that vibrant community, and who knows, maybe you'll even carve out your own legend in this digital tapestry.
Remember, Entropia Universe is more than just a game, it's a journey of discovery, challenge, and growth. Embrace the journey, connect with the community, and see what treasures you might uncover.
Beautifully said. Until next time, may your hunts be fruitful, your mining ventures prosperous, and your mind force abilities strong. And above all, may your Entropia Universe journey be filled with wonder, excitement, and those lasting connections.